The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.
Three New York City men were arrested yesterday on charges that they allegedly conspired to join ISIS in Syria. They were also plotting, supposedly, allegedly, to attack the United States, including some specifics, like, for example, killing President Obama and attacking Coney Island, which is part of Brooklyn here in New York City. New York City Police Department Commissioner Bill Bratton and some members of the FBI did a press conference yesterday, and they announced that these are terrorism-related charges being applied to all three of the men, that they were planning on heading to the Middle East to join ISIS. Officials were very specific about Akror Saidakhmetov, 19 years old, who they say was arrested earlier yesterday, actually at JFK Airport in New York City, planning to board a flight to Istanbul, Turkey. U.S. District Attorney in Brooklyn, Loretta Lynch, said that the other two suspects were both from Uzbekistan and that one had purchased a ticket for a March flight to Istanbul, and Abror Habibov, the 30-year-old, is accused of helping to fund the other's efforts, who was ultimately arrested in Florida. This is this is kind of interesting because we talked, Lewis, several times about ISIS and how well they're doing in terms of using social media to recruit in ways that a lot of other similar groups have not been able to do. And here we have evidence within our own country of individuals that were in touch with ISIS. They somehow decided that it's a good idea to actually head there and to join ISIS, and discussing very specific plots. Like I said, for example, one of them saying that he would be willing to kill U.S. President Barack Obama if asked.
Now, had they not been discussing specifics, such as killing the president or specific terror acts, and just speaking to themselves saying, perhaps we should go fight for ISIS, in that case, would we even be able to levy any charges against them? I
don't know. I was thinking about that because we have to assume that the FBI and similar agencies are constantly monitoring people that they believe are either in touch with ISIS or are thinking of joining ISIS or other similar groups. And my sense is, and from everything we know, I think this is backed up, that just being in touch with those groups and planning to go and meet or join those groups would warrant attention and detention from law enforcement agencies. But still, when you start talking about, I have a ticket, I'm going to fly over there, and I'm willing to kill the president, I have a sense that that puts you in a slightly different tier.
I think so. Unlike in France, which we talked about on the bonus show, who seized the passports of people who were just leaving, essentially, to go, but presumably fight for ISIS. I don't think that would fly here, but perhaps on the way back in, we'd be able to nab them.
We'll see what other fallout there is from this. I'm also interested to see if they will have some defense, even if it is court-appointed attorneys. Will there be an actual defense based on the fact that they had not yet done anything and trying to? Sometimes you'll see defense attorneys say, yeah, they were saying these things, but these guys weren't really going to do anything, and punishing them for anything close to what they would receive if they had done any of those things would be completely out of bounds. These were just misguided individuals that weren't really going to do any of this stuff. Or if they're just going to take a plea because their attorneys will say, listen, they've got you.
Yeah, I'm guessing there will probably be a plea deal here. But yeah, what is the difference between these guys talking about killing the president and when someone posts on Facebook that the president should be assassinated? We don't see the same reaction for both stories.
And I think it'll come down to whether they can link the actions that they did take, getting the tickets, making specific threats, being in touch with actual militants as opposed to someone who just posts on Facebook. Is that what's going to be the difference maker? We'll definitely see. The situation for Fox News journalist, commentator, opinion guy, Bill O'Reilly is getting worse and worse. To catch you up, Bill O'Reilly has come under fire because of some claims that he made numerous times regarding his coverage of a so-called war zone in the Falkland Islands. He now has backtracked and said he never claimed to be in the Falkland Islands back in 1982, but that the danger in Buenos Aires at riots that were going on was as he described, but even elements of that story is now being called into question. He now is being accused of 2 further distortions about his journalistic past. This is going from bad to worse, and I will tell you about these stories. First of all, it appears that Bill O'Reilly has repeatedly lied about being present at the suicide of an associate of Lee Harvey Oswald's named George Morenchild. Media Matters is now alleging in a new report. In his book called Killing Kennedy, and in a bunch of other appearances, Bill O'Reilly said that when he was a reporter for the Dallas-based TV station WFAA, he was on the porch of Morenchild's daughter's house in Palm Beach, Florida, when he heard DeMorenchild shoot himself with a gun in March of 1977. Here's Bill O'Reilly talking about that.
You will be entertained and you will be informed, no doubt.
One question you can't answer. Could you tell us now? For one question, when you closed the book, you were done with the book, you handed it to the publisher, and you said, I still don't have an answer to that question.
Yeah.
Which is?
There's a guy named George DeMorenchild who is a shadowy guy who had CIA connections, and he's swirling around Lee Harvey Oswald. Oswald's a loser, lowest rung. Okay? No way this guy should be swirling around him. Now, I reported on this guy when I was working at WFAA TV in Dallas, this DeMorenchild, because he taught at Bishop College in Dallas. I can't put that together. Now, I chased DeMorenchild to Florida, and I was about to knock on the door where he was, his daughter's house, and he blew his brains out with a shotgun.
Really? Oh, my goodness. The great Bill O'Reilly, the author of Killing Kennedy.
So 2 former colleagues of Bill O'Reilly's at WFAA TV, Byron Harris and Tracy Rowlett, told Media Matters that Bill O'Reilly was not in Florida at the time of the suicide. He was in Dallas at the time that DeMorenchild killed himself. Media Matters also has pointed to the autobiography of Gaten Fonzie, who's an investigator on the House Select Committee on Assassinations. And he wrote, Bill O'Reilly called me to ask me about this assassination, and I have taped telephone conversations where Bill O'Reilly says, I've been trying to run down the story by telephone from Texas, and that he would be heading down to Florida to do further investigations, again, after the suicide took place. That's lie number 2 now that Bill O'Reilly appears to be in the middle of. Lie number 3 is that Bill O'Reilly appears to have lied about witnessing Nunn's execution in El Salvador. According to information collected by Media Matters, Bill O'Reilly seems to have fabricated his story that he was a witness to the execution of 4 nuns in El Salvador during their civil war in 1980. He said, quote, I've seen guys gun down nuns in El Salvador, and, quote, was in El Salvador and I saw nuns get shot in the back of the head when he was a CBS correspondent. There's a well-known incident that Bill O'Reilly appears to be referring to, which is the well-documented execution of 4 churchwomen by the Salvadorian National Guard in December of 1980. After that event, experts say there were no priests or nuns killed for more than 8 years, so by every indication, that specific incident has to be the one Bill O'Reilly is referring to. However, Bill O'Reilly's own recollections conflict with each other. He wrote in his book, The No Spin Zone, that he did not begin covering the Salvadorian Civil War until a few weeks after he began as a CBS News correspondent in 1981, which was already a year after the execution took place. Media Matters argues that Bill O'Reilly could not possibly have witnessed the murder of the churchwomen if we are to believe his own timeline of events and his own employment history. Yet another seeming inconsistency in Bill O'Reilly's stories. This may be even worse than Brian Williams.
I think so far it is. But what's interesting about these lies is they seem to be like they're not really factually incorrect when it comes to the stories that they're about that are happening in the world and things like that. Like, yes, Brian Williams was flying over somewhere. U.S. aircraft was being shot at. One crashed and landed. Yes, these things did happen in El Salvador. Yes, this guy did blow his brains out who was connected with Oswald somehow. but the lies are just kind of exaggerations about where these personalities were and where these people were and how they were involved with these stories.
Right. They're not making up stories that didn't happen. They're just placing themselves there in ways that appear to be completely untrue. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, and as journalists and I guess storytellers, perhaps they're just doing this because it does make their stories way more interesting.
It certainly seems to. And meanwhile, Bill O'Reilly's ratings have actually gone up since these three stories have been called into question. His ratings this Monday were up week to week and year over year. 3.3 million viewers, 568,000 in the key demographic of 25 to 54 years of age. That's 12% a 12% increase in total viewers. 15% increase within that key demographic, and compared to last year at the same time, also up 9% overall, 19% in the key demographic. The most fascinating part of this to me, Lewis, is not that the individuals like Brian Williams and Bill O'Reilly seem to be self-aggrandizing themselves by inserting themselves into these stories that they had no role in. It's fascinating that Fox News doesn't really seem to care very much, and the viewers of Fox News don't seem to care either.
No, I don't think Fox is going to care, especially now that ratings seem to be going up and the viewers all love him. And so they probably still think he's telling the truth about all of this.
Yeah, it appears that way. And it tells us so much about also the difference between, for all of the bad stuff that all corporate media does, there is a significant difference between NBC News and Fox News. And we will ultimately see if Fox News even makes an official statement about this. But it's almost like they're happy just ignoring it. Bill O'Reilly can say whatever he wants, tell whatever stories he wants. We don't really care. He's driving ratings. And remember, the term news is not a regulated term. It's like organic food is a regulated term. Natural food is not. You can say that whenever you want, and courts have ruled that you can call yourself news, even if it's entertainment or made up stories or historical fiction or whatever it is. And that is being shown very, very precisely here by Bill O'Reilly.
Yeah, I could have a show called the Austin News Hour and only talk about the finger smudges on my cell phone screen. It's completely unregulated.
54% of Republicans say that deep down, President Obama is a Muslim. They were asked, what do you think that his religious beliefs actually are deep down, which is a different question from what is his religion, because President Obama has been very clear that his religion is Christianity. Different question, though, being released by this poll from the University of California at Merced. This is now the next layer. He may be a putative Christian, but in actuality, inherently, President Obama is actually a Muslim. If you look at the results divided by party affiliation, it should come as no surprise that it is Republicans who much more, by orders of magnitude more than any other group, believe that President Obama is actually a Muslim, 54%. Only 9% of Republicans believe that President Obama is a Christian, the religion that he says he is. This is so ridiculous, particularly when we know religion is completely self-professed. How can you tell someone that they're not actually the religion that they claim to be? I could say, you know what? I actually feel that I'm a Christian. I consider myself Christian. I was born into a Jewish house, but I'm Christian. How can someone tell me that I'm not, right? It's completely arbitrary and self-professed, yet nobody seems to believe Obama.
I think it's that Obama is claiming to be a Christian, but that he actually has Muslim beliefs and that he actually is a practicing Muslim, but just hides it from the American people because they want him to like him, so he says he's a Christian.
It's very conspiratorial, yeah.
Yeah, it is. But, I mean, I look at everything I've seen from Obama, and I think to myself that deep down, I think Obama's an atheist. But all of these Republicans, they watch Fox News, and they see clip after clip of Obama defending Muslims, and they think, oh, this guy must be a Muslim.
So 10% of Democrats and 26% of independents answered that they believe President Obama deep down is a Muslim. Democrats' most frequent answer was Christian, 45%. I don't know, also a really popular answer, 47% of independents, 26% of Democrats, and 19% of Republicans said we don't know deep down what religion President Obama is. I don't know if that alone is a bad thing in and of itself. I know that the context is that a lot of people are doubting President Obama's Christianity because of right-wing media. But putting that aside for a second, it would actually be really great if the religion of candidates wasn't known, wasn't an issue, and no one wanted to know. It would just confirm that we're in the direction of separation of church and state, which we should have. But I don't think that's what the I don't knows are coming from.
I think there needs to be an extra answer available here. Do they think he is an atheist? Because I don't know seems like it could be just every other category besides from Christian and Muslim. So it's not detailed enough.
Truly, truly amazing. Send me your thoughts on this via Twitter, twitter.com/dpacman. A lot happening on today's show, including a great book recommendation coming up next.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com. Welcome back to the David Pakman Show.
Our program is mostly funded by our audience through the David Pakman Show membership program. You can find out more at davidpakman.com/membership, but let me make it clear that you get a whole bunch of great perks when you're a David Pakman Show member, including an entire additional show called The Bonus Show just for our paid subscribers, and you are helping to support alternatives to corporate media. And that is always a good thing. Today's new member of the day is Audrey Comer. Audrey, thank you for being a David Pakman Show member. We couldn't do it without your support. That is not an exaggeration by any means. Have a great book recommendation today. I get books sent to the studio all the time. And I must admit, not to offend anybody, but 95% of them are not things that are either relevant to my personal interests or in any way relevant to the show. But a few months ago, Daniel Sullivan sent me his first novel called Black Collar. And he said, David, this is my novel. It's the first in a series of 3. And it is about net neutrality. It is about politics and intrigue. And it's just a story that I think you would be interested in. And I looked at it, and it at least passed the initial test, which is this obviously something I'm not interested in? It passed that test, so I kept it in my stack of books to read. And I recently picked it up, and I have to tell you, it was a fantastic read. It is a story about 2 MIT graduates who are getting very close to unveiling a revolutionary new technology that they have. And by chance, an encounter, and I don't want to say too much, an encounter pits them against a senator. And I think that's all I really want to say. I really recommend this book to our audience. I think our audience would really enjoy it. And even if you don't care about the net neutrality element or about other elements, it's just a really good read, Lewis.
Yeah, it's an interesting topic. I know you told me about this before, and it does sound interesting. If I'm going to pick up a book in the not too distant future, it may be this one.
This may be it, yeah. And I'll let the audience know, when I read the book, I noticed that there were maybe more typos in the book than I'm sometimes used to. And I was in touch with the author about it, and he explained, I self-published this. It did not have a line item, a line-by-line copy edit. I'm correcting errors as quickly as I'm able to, and I know that already the version that's available on Amazon has been much corrected compared to the version I had. And I said, I'm just going to make clear that this is self-published because people might see that and get the wrong impression. The story is fantastic, and Daniel has been self-publishing this. So the book is Black Collar by Daniel Sullivan. Very, very good book. I recommend it. I actually look forward to the second book in the trilogy that Daniel is planning. This is so funny. I was looking at this article from the Austin American Statesman, and it's an article about Texas legislators who they threw like a little party to celebrate the 10th anniversary of Texas banning same-sex marriages. So this is like an anti-gay party. And they have a cake that reads 10th anniversary of 2005 Marriage Act. And it's so funny because the cake looks like it's a picture of a gay wedding where 2 guys who have just gotten married are cutting the cake together. And it's just so ironic. I mean, you can't write stuff that's this good where they're celebrating anti-gayness, right? Being against gay marriage with a state ban against defining marriage as man and woman. and it looks like a picture straight out of a gay wedding celebration. What did you think when you saw this, Lewis?
I was laughing. I was laughing out loud. It's just one of those happy accidents where everything they planned and did ended up culminating. The culmination of that was this wonderful photo that does look like it's like a gay wedding. It's incredible.
If you were to say, let's do a parody of homophobes celebrating anti-gay marriage, and let's make it look like it's actually gay men celebrating their gay marriage, it would essentially be indistinguishable from this picture. You might make a couple changes to make it even more obviously satirical, but it would essentially be this picture.
It really would be. It is very, very funny. And I'm sure they probably feel pretty embarrassed now that this has gone viral and people are talking about it. But I don't think they'll be celebrating much longer. I think
they may be having a very different gathering with a very different cake soon, because the U.S. Supreme Court is set to take up same-sex marriage cases from several states very, very soon. And we may have a broad ruling from the Supreme Court. Clarence Thomas has already said he thinks that the pro-gay marriage side of the Supreme Court has the 5 votes that they need. I wonder what kind of a cake they'll have in Texas after we have national gay marriage, which may happen this year, but it may be a few more years, but eventually it's going to happen.
The legislators, can you make a cake out of tears? I don't know. that may be it.
It may be a black cake. It may be, you know how red velvet cake has become very popular with red food coloring? This may be a black cake because they see this as the death of, what do they call it? Family values or something like that?
Family values, freedom, you name it.
Hey, this is super interesting. In the U.S., the Republican Party has not, broadly speaking, distanced itself from evolution deniers. In fact, half of the Republicans in elected national office deny that evolution is a real thing, 49% of them. In Canada, even conservatives are sensible enough to distance themselves from evolution deniers. And this is the story about Rick Nichols, who's a progressive conservative member of the Ontario legislature representing the riding of Chatham-Kent-Essex. Ontario is a province in Canada. Each province has its own provincial government, and the members of provincial parliaments are called MPPs. I'm going to play the video here for you where he says that he does not believe in evolution.
So should we be teaching evolution in schools?
That is one's personal belief set. If they believe that, so be it. For myself, I don't believe in evolution, but that doesn't mean that I speak for everyone else in my caucus. That's a personal belief. That's a personal stance.
So after this happened, the Globe and Mail is reporting that Rick Nichols was quickly reined in by party leaders. PC interim leader Jim Wilson swiftly tried to distance himself from Nichols, and within the hour he issued a statement saying that, Nichols issued a statement saying, oh, the Tory House leader, Steve Clark, spoke to me, and I am now acknowledging that my comment is not at all reflective of the Ontario PC party policy. In Canada, even among the conservatives, it's essentially political suicide to say you don't believe in evolution, because even the right-wingers in Canada who may be in favor of supply-side economics and other fiscal policy, it's still seen as really, really bad to flat out deny science.
Now, presumably, he knew this, and he said it anyway. So I would like to applaud him for actually speaking his mind and talking about what he believes instead of just lying about it.
And he's being upfront that this has no connection at all to his party's point of view.
That is true. But apparently it is political suicide, and I'm happy to see that. It makes Canada look that much more appealing to me.
I really wish that the Republican Party here in the U.S. would say, listen, we're for supply-side economics. We don't care about inequality. We're not that concerned with separation of church and state, but we're not going to tolerate insane, retrograde, fact-free views on science. But no, as I mentioned, these views are pretty much mainstream. They're welcome in the Republican Party. 49% of Republicans do not believe in evolution, according to a new public policy polling survey from just 48 hours ago. You're not going to see the Republican Party distance itself from science deniers when half the party are science deniers. And I think, didn't we say 2 or 3 weeks ago that somewhere around 70 or 75% of Republicans are climate deniers. They deny the science around climate change as well.
Yes, so it was something like that. You know, there aren't many developed countries at our level of development where these battles are happening. And it's, but, you know, Canada seems to be on the ball, so I'm happy for them.
The U.S. is unique amongst the most developed countries in a number of ways. The amount of acceptance of anti-science views and the prevalence of anti-science views among national elected officials. Death penalty, something that most countries at our level of development have figured out makes no sense. Being incredibly homophobic and trying to impose religious views to further anti-gay discrimination. What else? Incarceration. We lead the world in incarceration, up there with North Korea and Russia in terms of incarceration per capita. We have a very, very high infant mortality rate compared to other countries at our level of development. It seems that when compared to our peers in the developed nations, the U.S. leads in categories that we should be, quite frankly, pretty embarrassed to lead in.
Yeah, it's. I don't know how you can have a country at our level of development this day and age and have numbers and statistics and things like we just mentioned. It seems to not make any sense, but here we are.
After the break, a billionaire governor comes in, taxes the rich, increases the minimum wage, everything that supply-siders say you shouldn't do, and his economy booms. I will tell you about Mark Dayton next. Remember to join our Reddit discussion forum at davidpakman.com/Reddit. That's REDDIT.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com. Welcome back to the David Pakman Show.
Not that we necessarily needed any more evidence that the supply side right-wing economics of trickle down and don't tax the rich and huge income inequality and wealth inequality don't work. We have a really great case study from Minnesota, where in January of 2011, Governor Mark Dayton inherited a $6.2 billion budget deficit and a 7% unemployment rate from his predecessor, supply-sider, voodoo economics, Tim Pawlenty, the very quickly forgotten Republican candidate for president. He called himself Minnesota's first true fiscally conservative governor in modern history. He prided himself on never raising state taxes other than increasing the tax on cigarettes by 75 cents a pack. And between 2003 and 2010, which is when Pawlenty was governor, he managed to add, you're going to think this is a typo, but it's not, 6,200 jobs. Okay, 6,200 jobs as the first truly fiscally conservative governor. During his first 4 years in office, Governor Dayton has raised the state income tax from 7.85 to 9.85 on individuals earning over $150,000 a year, couples earning over $250,000 a year. That brought in over $2 billion more dollars. You would think that's a job killer, right? That's going to destroy the economy. He also increased Minnesota's minimum wage to $9.50 an hour, or rather put in place a plan to increase it to $9.50 an hour by 2018. He also passed a state law that guaranteed equal pay for women. Sounds like job killers, sounds like government intervention, getting too involved in business and blah, blah, blah. And that's exactly what some Republicans like State Rep Mark Uglum warned, saying, quote, the job creators, the big corporations, the small corporations, they will leave. It's all dollars and cents to them, but they were proven wrong. Between 2011 and 2015, Governor Dayton added 172,000 new jobs in Minnesota's economy. That's 165,800 more in Dayton's first term than Pawlenty in both of his terms. And even though Minnesota's top income tax rate is the fourth highest in the country, it has the fifth lowest unemployment rate in the country at 3.6%. Lewis, what do you make of this?
I think I like these numbers. I mean, we don't really have any evidence in our country's history that what Pawlenty was doing works. We don't have any evidence of that anywhere in the world, really. But we have plenty of evidence that taxing the rich and increasing, paying people a livable wage has a positive impact on the economy.
What about the destruction of business that Republicans fearmonger around? Forbes, which is no progressive rag, has ranked Minnesota the 9th best state for business. Scott Walker, who claims to be the super pro-business guy in Wisconsin, Wisconsin is ranked 32nd in the country in terms of the best states to do business. And in spite of the fear-mongering that all of the high-income earners would just leave Minnesota, actually 6,230 more Minnesotans filed in that top income tax bracket in the year after Dayton's tax increases went through. What's the budget look like? Well, as of last month, Minnesota has a $1 billion budget surplus, and Governor Dayton has pledged to reinvest at least a third of that money into public schools. Wow. Actually taking the surplus from the demand side stimulus and reinvesting it in education, which I don't know, I think might have an even more positive effect on the state's economy, because we know that there's a positive economic impact from increasing the average education and quality of education for people. Isn't it official at this point that trickle-down economics have been completely debunked?
I think so. Unfortunately, a lot of voters don't know that. Just like voters in Alabama and Mississippi aren't aware that it's their politicians for the last couple hundred years that have been destroying their states. Who knows if voters up there in Minnesota even realize about the positive things that are happening there because of these policies.
I wish that Republican Governor Sam Brown back in Kansas could learn a thing or two from Mark Dayton. We've talked 2 or 3 times now about how Sam Brown back went into Kansas, cutting education, cutting taxes for the rich, cutting social services. The state is doing so poorly, lagging the recovery in terms of jobs, whereas Minnesota doing really well. It's just sad because we could say it's all politics or it's just political games, but this actually affects people. These are jobs for people who need money to support their families. This is people's lives that we're talking about. And Republicans insist on pushing these policies of supply side economics that we have no evidence at all have ever worked. And it's affecting actual people's lives. Story from Texas, where at Kermit Elementary School, officials called it a threat when a 9-year-old boy, Aiden Steward, in a playful act of make-believe, told a classmate that he could make him disappear with a ring forged in the fictional Middle-earth's Mount of Doom. It sounded unbelievable, said the boy's father. He insists his son didn't mean anything by it. The Stewards had just watched The Hobbit, The Battle of 5 Armies a few days earlier. This inspired Aiden's imagination, and he went into school and told one of his classmates that with this ring from the Middle-earth world, he could make the guy disappear. He could make him invisible. And teachers said that this constituted a threat, and he has been suspended because he could make his classmate invisible, like Bilbo Baggins, who stole Gollum's precious ring, apparently. I don't really know much about the story, but this is what I've read about it. This is so insane, isn't it, Lewis?
I compare it to when we were that age, and we would just run around making shooting noises and pretending our hands are guns and threatening kids we didn't like, getting into fights, and like no one, there were no repercussions really, apart from maybe just, detention if you were a little too ruckus. And I don't think times have changed.
Certainly, yeah. And Principal Roxanne Greer was asked to comment about the 4th grader suspension. She declined to comment, citing confidentiality policies. The family moved to this school district 6 months ago, but this is actually the 3rd time, I believe, that Aiden has been suspended. 2 of the disciplinary actions were in-school suspensions because he, at one point, referred to a classmate as black. And in another instance, he brought his favorite book to school, the Big Book of Knowledge. The class was studying the solar system, and he had the Big Book of Knowledge, which has stuff about planets. So Aiden brought the book in, thinking it would be illuminating for some students. But, Lewis, that children's encyclopedia has a section about pregnancy, and it depicted a pregnant woman in an illustration, not even a picture, an illustration. I think it should have been taken a step further. Suspension for a picture of a pregnant woman. Arrest the kid because he's clearly ruining the lives of all of the children in that classroom.
He might have destroyed the entire town with that one. Let's remember that this is Texas, of course. So perhaps in more liberal areas, this would not have been as big of a deal. But you never know. Like I said, times have changed.
This really reminds me of the Janet Jackson Nipplegate incident at the Super Bowl where, wow, all these kids' lives are ruined because Janet Jackson's breast popped out for 2 seconds we need to legislate morality. We're small government conservatives, of course, but let's legislate morality, the words that can be said, whether bodies can be shown. Let's get hyper involved in the minutia of what is and isn't allowed on television. But we're small government conservatives. We don't really want government imposing on private business.
And God forbid a kid brings a book into school that has the word knowledge on it.
Yeah, that was scary. The first red flag for the teacher was that it was a book about so-called science. And then once they saw a drawing of a pregnant woman, the kid needed to be suspended before his destructive behavior would bring down all of his classmates.
Or take it one step further. Let's just send him to Mars so he can't harm humanity any more than he already has.
Let's take a break. We have your voicemail coming up and a really horrific story about Christian homeschoolers selling their daughter at a discount. The reason why the daughter was discounted will be very, very shocking.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com. Welcome back to the David Pakman Show.
Christian homeschoolers have tried to sell their daughter at a discount because she was damaged by molestation. This is just an incredible story. Jennifer Austin was adopted as a child into a Christian home. She was then blocked off from the outside world, and during her formative years, she grew up in this kind of strict, severe, religious parenting model that she says got worse and worse after her mom got egged on by homeschooling friends and church leaders. And we know that a lot of times Christian fundamentalists opt for homeschooling over private schools because it allows them to have complete control over their child. You never know what dangerous stuff they might hear about in the real world, like our last story about a kid bringing a science book which had a drawing of a pregnant woman. And that could be very, very damaging to the young Christian child. So when parents were asked why they homeschool their children, 77% said they want to provide moral instruction that secular schools lack. And I think we've talked about this before, Lewis, that the overwhelming majority of homeschoolers are Christian fundamentalists, evangelicals very often, who don't want a secular education.
That has a lot to do with it, yes.
And Austin's description of her life in their homeschooling house sounds more like something out of Saudi Arabia, not California. Dating was a complete no-no. She might be able to have a parent-approved courtship and maybe go to places in public, but never hand-holding, and even that would be pretty tough. She had to wear long skirts and blouses with a high neckline, always long sleeves. If she chose a skirt which went to the mid-calf, she would have to put on knee-length boots so that no leg was shown. Even my swimsuit went down to my knees and had sleeves. I wasn't allowed to shave. My grandfather felt that any body part, such as my legs that needed to be shaved, should not be shown in public. So here's the most appalling part. At the age of 20, Austin was told by her parents that she had been sold to a man twice her age, a situation that Austin and others say is actually pretty commonplace. And she said her parents' asking price for her was $25,000. This is much cheaper. The normal fee for selling a homeschooled Christian is apparently about $50,000. And this was because she was molested as a child. And within the Christian community, that makes you damaged goods, and you are no longer worth the same price on the open market. Thankfully, Austin did manage to escape from her old life, which was basically imprisonment. Escaping was pretty difficult. Her mother, she refused to marry the man that her mother and father were paid to deliver her to, and she was able to escape. And I mean, Lewis, this is just straight out of the Middle Ages.
It's incredible. Clearly, what is happening here in this particular case is that they adopt a child as sort of an investment, right? Spend as little money as possible on them, try to brainwash them, and then try to flip this child for $25,000 to $50,000. How often is this happening?
I wish I knew. And for all the people who are saying that the homeschooling element is not really relevant to the story, you miss a completely key point, which is that of isolation. Homeschooling isolates children deliberately. It denies them the right to mix with their peers and be part of the wider community, which also provides protection. Because think about it, if you're in the wider community, you see the contrast to how you're being treated. You hear about police and resources that exist, and homeschooled children are essentially living in a what you could call a total institution. Some homeschoolers, of course, do have their children socialize with others. Of course, mostly it's other homeschoolers, and all can be controlled in this kind of same way. It is a minority that truly have a life that is open to the full real world, the way someone who goes to an actual school gets exposed to. And I think that the homeschooling element is an important part of this story.
Yeah, I think I can't help but think there's something sinister going on when I hear that someone is being homeschooled. I mean, if they don't leave the house much, if there is no TV, no internet, I mean, you could really be living in a complete vacuum.
A resolution in Idaho calling for Idaho to be declared a Christian state is one of the items on the agenda when the Kootenai County Republican Central Committee meets. And some of the language in the resolution says, quote, resolved that the state of Idaho is formally and specifically declared a Christian state. The state of Idaho and all its institutions will render full recognition to the Christian basis thereof, not permitting any diminution or rejection of its status, nor any restriction on its presence or role in the public arena. This is to be understood as the preservation of the Judeo-Christian bedrock of the founding of the United States, and is not to be interpreted as restricting the free exercise of any other religion. What part of separation of church and state do they not get? Even if the resolution says this resolution isn't meant to damage those who follow a different religion, it is still the establishment of a religion as the state religion. They just don't seem to care about the Constitution, except when they tout their constitutional fetishism.
I think the idea is that, look, the founding fathers were Christian. So therefore, this is a Christian nation, and everything about it should be Christian. And I guess the founding fathers weren't smart enough to specifically state that when they were, I don't know, creating the laws, creating the country, creating our documents.
I think that they actually didn't go far enough. They should have really gone all in and said, we're going to declare Idaho a white, male, heterosexual state. This doesn't necessarily mean that we are seeking to reduce the status of those who are not white or not male or not heterosexual, but we're just saying we're calling this a white, male, heterosexual Christian state. If you think that, maybe states' rights trumps the Constitution, you say, David, focus on what the state Constitution says. Section 4 of the Idaho State Constitution is the guarantee of religious liberty, and it has one section which says, nor shall any preference be given to any religious denomination or mode of worship. And it is very, very obvious that declaring the state religion, declaring the state a Christian state is certainly giving preference to a particular religion, even if it is just in establishing that this is the religion that is associated with the state.
Well, how else can we argue our point? It's written in the state constitution. It's written in the federal constitution. It's stunning that we even have to have this conversation, given how clear it is in the Idaho and U.S. constitutions. Yeah, and you know what? Not that this resolution will even pass or that they think it will. It's probably more just about making a point.
Questions, comments, complaints, anything. 219-2-DAVID-P. That is our voicemail number, 219-2-DAVID-P. Here's a voicemail we got from Heather.
Hi, this is Heather. I consider you to be somewhat of an authority on anti-Semitism at this point. And it surprises me how many people who are really liberal-minded will say to me that, Jews get so much flack because Jews are this particular way or that particular way, or historically right. Jews have done this, or historically Jews have done that. And I think that's just, really shocking to me to hear how many people I hear say that, and who otherwise, I think, believe, what I say to those people is no, they have been persecuted because they're a minority and the numbers are, so low that it's just easy to target this particular group.
Yeah, and what I would actually say is ask those people what percentage of the world population they think is Jewish, because very often when you talk to those folks, they say, oh, it's like 5, 10, I've even heard 20%. And when you say, did you know that it's actually, you're talking about 0.19% of the world population, their world is upended. And yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about, Heather. Listen, I'm not anti-Semitic and I don't condone anti-Semitism, but if Jews just weren't so dead set on conspiring to control world governments and financial markets and so cheap, then I don't think people would be that angry with them. Right. Yeah. Brilliant analysis. Thank you. On today's bonus show, how is American junk food affecting other countries? Condoms in California prisons. And will Aquaman ever be cool? I don't know the answer. Lewis will tell us. Get access to the bonus show, davidpakman.com/membership.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.